Okay, hello, it's me again. Now we will continue with our video tutorials. For this series of tutorials, we will be doing section 3B, question 1, part B. In the previous tutorial, you did question 1, part A, so now we will move on to question 1, part B. Subsequently, we will move on to section 3C, question 1, part A. Now, for section 3B, question 1, so this is the question. We start off with the basic 3C's way of analyzing questions. The command word here is assess, and the context here is basically Singapore, but it also wants you to consider how is Singapore different from the US, okay? And finally, the content of this question basically is about solutions to the problem of unemployment, okay? Now, just a little bit more on question analysis. So, for the command word assess, you always need to present two sides of the argument and also to conclude finally with a stand, okay? So, in this essay, what are the two sides? Basically, the two sides are Singapore will solve unemployment differently from the US, and Singapore will not solve unemployment differently from the US. Okay, for each of this side of the argument, you need to provide the explanations. Okay, for example, why will Singapore solve unemployment differently from the US? Why will Singapore not solve unemployment differently from the US? Okay, and ultimately you come to your stand and you ask yourself which is more likely to occur based on what you have presented. Okay. Next, the content. Now, before you even talk about the solutions of unemployment, you need to realize that there are different types of solutions for different types of unemployment. Okay. So you have to ask yourself, what type of unemployment does Singapore experience? And so far, based on your knowledge, what are the solutions used in Singapore and why are these solutions used in Singapore? Okay, so just to recap, the three main types of unemployment that you should be dealing with is they are cyclical, structural, and frictional unemployment. And at the same time, you should also know and present the solutions used in Singapore to deal with these unemployments and their reasons. Okay. Now, for the context, you need to know what exactly did the USA do and how is it relevant to Singapore. Okay. So what the US did, very simple, it is found in your preamble, which is basically talking about additional fiscal spending that is needed to reduce increasing unemployed numbers in the US. Okay. So basically this is an example of fiscal policy, and what you can solve using fiscal policy essentially is cyclical unemployment. Okay. Now, so let's go on to the question proper. So I'll present an overview of the answer. First, in your introduction, you need to identify for me the different types of unemployment in Singapore. Also, introduce how the US solves this unemployment problem. Essentially, this is fiscal policy. And because of that, you should also define fiscal policy. Okay, and finally, in the conclusion, you will also give me an overview of your essay answer. Okay, I realize that not many of you are very good at writing an overview in the intro stage. So I'll give you an example of an overview, and hopefully you will find that useful and you will have a clear idea of what should be expected in a good intro. Okay. Now, for the body, I split it up into two parts. I think the first part, most of you will be able to get it. And the first part, the first half here, basically you are expected to explain how fiscal policy would theoretically reduce cyclical unemployment. Okay, so you present the standard ADAS explanation, okay, and also evaluate fiscal policy's effectiveness in the Singaporean context. Okay, up to this stage, it shouldn't be too difficult, and I'll expect most people to actually get it. Okay, The next half of the body is actually the more difficult one, and this is really the one that will push you towards the high L2 and L3. Okay, basically you're required to explain alternative policies that are more effective in addressing cyclical unemployment in Singapore. Okay, remember, fiscal policy is to address cyclical unemployment, and when you are evaluating its effectiveness, you will find that it is not the most effective, okay, for various reasons that I will go through later. So once it is not effective, you have to present to the marker alternative policies that will be more effective. Okay. Then at the same time, you also have to present alternative policies that deal with structural and frictional unemployment. Remember, in your intro, we already introduced that there will be cyclical, structural, and frictional unemployment, right? So therefore, you will need to present policies to deal with this type of unemployment. Okay, so generally these are supply side policies. Finally, in your conclusion, you should conclude that whether Singapore uses fiscal policy to solve increasing unemployment, and if not, what kind of policies will Singapore actually use. Okay, so let's just move on to the essay proper. Okay, in the intro, like I said, you will introduce the different types of unemployment, in this case cyclical, structural, and frictional. Now, the next two dot points is quite obvious, so I'll just skip that. Lastly is the overview now. Or what would you write for an overview? Okay, so very simple. My suggested overview here is that we explore how fiscal policy may be useful in dealing with cyclical unemployment, and then we determine its effectiveness with respect to Singapore. Okay. Then we will move on to explore other policies that is used in Singapore to tackle unemployment. And finally, we conclude that although Singapore continues to use fiscal policy, it is only a part of a combination of policies used. Okay, so it is not the main policy used, but only one part in a combination of policies. Okay, now for you to be able to write a good overview of your answer, you first need to plan your answer, right? So this is why we try to introduce the planning stage before you even start to write out the essay. Okay, so you need to plan your essay beforehand, and also what helps is to have a good reading or a good analysis of the question. Okay. Lastly, what is also important is you need to have a very firm grasp of your content. Okay, so these three things: planning, question analysis, firm grasp of content. That should give you a very good idea of what you want to write in an essay every time you see the question. If the marker actually reads a good overview, he knows for sure that you are on the right track. Okay, now we move on to the body of the essay proper. Okay, so what we will do is for the first part of the body is to explain how fiscal policy would theoretically reduce cyclical unemployment. Okay, so basically what we are looking for is expansionary fiscal policy, that is to either increase government spending or to decrease taxes. Okay, so the impact of increase in government spending is to directly increase AD through the G component. Okay, remember that G is one of the components in AD, right? Now, the other way to conduct expansionary fiscal policy is actually to reduce taxes, T. Okay, now I want to be very careful when it comes to talking about taxes in fiscal policy. You need to be very clear about what the tax is imposed on. Okay, and generally I would recommend two areas or two types of tax. Either you impose the tax on firms' profits, in which case they are called corporate taxes, or you impose the tax on personal income, in which case they are called income taxes. Okay, so corporate taxes would affect AD indirectly through investment component. Okay, but personal income tax would increase AD indirectly through the consumption component. Okay, so what happens is this, very simple. Okay, for a corporate tax, when you tax on their profits, they are making less profits, right? So if the firms make less profits, they are less likely to invest more money. Okay. Similarly, for income taxes, when you increase income taxes, disposable income actually falls, and therefore consumption falls. Okay. Now I'll be very careful in terms of saying that an increase in import tax is actually an expansionary fiscal policy. Okay, I'm not saying that it is wrong, but I'm saying that it actually leads to a lot of unnecessary complications. Okay, if you're interested to know what are the complications, you can ask me separately outside of class or during a consultation. Okay, but for a usual essay, I would recommend two types of tax that you want to deal with when you're trying to do fiscal policy. That is corporate taxes and income taxes. Okay. Now, so let's just go back. So here again, a good opportunity for you to show me a diagram, and what you should draw is the ADS diagram with a rightward shift of AD. Okay. So when there's a rightward shift of AD, your real national income actually increase, and this leads to a fall in cyclical unemployment. Okay, so this is what the US have been doing.
Okay, I think this video clip is getting too long, so we will just stop here for a break, and then we will continue again in the next part of the video. Okay?